I should have known something was off when Jason started acting different around year 4. Not that it was his fault exactly, but he became so predictable. Every morning, the same routine: coffee, toast, that annoying little whistle while he got ready for his boring office job. Meanwhile, I'm trying to build something meaningful at my career, working with people who actually have ambition and drive. That's when I really started noticing Marcus. He was everything Jason wasn't: confident, successful, the kind of man who commanded respect when he walked into a room. Marcus was probably 15 years older than me, but he had this energy that Jason never possessed. When Marcus asked me to stay late to work on the Henderson project, I felt this flutter of excitement I hadn't experienced in months. "Your husband won't mind you working late again?" Marcus asked, leaning against my desk that first night we were alone in the office. "Jason, he's probably playing video games anyway. He won't even notice I'm gone." I laughed, but there was truth in it that stung a little. Marcus smiled in that knowing way of his. "A woman like you deserves someone who notices." Looking back at those first 3 years with Jason, they really had been good. We were young and stupid in love, planning our whole future together. The wedding was beautiful. Jason cried during his vows, which everyone thought was so sweet. I thought it was sweet too. At the time, he promised to love me, honor me, cherish me forever. But promises are easy when you're caught up in the moment, living up to them day after day, year after year. That's the hard part. By our first anniversary, the shine was already wearing off. Jason would come home from work, plop down on the couch, and that was it for the evening. No more surprise dates. No more long conversations about our dreams. Just routine. Meanwhile, I'm trying to advance my career, meeting interesting people, growing as a person. But Jason seemed perfectly content to stay exactly where he was. The first time something happened with Marcus, it wasn't even planned. We'd been working late again, genuinely working. I should add, when he offered to drive me home since my car was in the shop. Instead, we ended up at that little wine bar downtown, talking about everything Jason and I never talked about anymore. Art, politics, travel, ambitions. Marcus had been to Europe 6 times. Jason had never even been on an airplane. "You're wasted on him," Marcus said, his hand covering mine across the small table. "A woman with your intelligence, your beauty. You should be with someone who appreciates what he has." I should have pulled my hand away. Should have said something about being married, about this being inappropriate. Instead, I felt more alive than I had in months. When Marcus suggested getting a room at the hotel across the street, I heard myself saying yes before my brain could catch up. Afterward, driving home to Jason, I expected to feel guilty, but mostly I felt vindicated, like I'd finally done something for myself instead of just existing in the safe little bubble Jason had built for us. He was already asleep when I got home, hadn't even texted to see where I was. That told me everything I needed to know about how much he actually valued our marriage. The thing about crossing that line is how easy it becomes to cross it again. And again, Marcus and I fell into a pattern: late nights at the office, weekend business trips, stolen afternoons at his apartment across town. He made me feel sophisticated, desirable, important. With Jason, I was just a wife. With Marcus, I was a woman worth risking everything for. It wasn't just Marcus, either. At my 10-year high school reunion, I reconnected with Tommy Richardson, my first real boyfriend. He'd gotten divorced the year before, was looking amazing, and kept buying me drinks while Jason schmoozed with people from his graduating class on the other side of the room. When Tommy suggested we get some air, I didn't hesitate. We ended up in his car in the parking lot, and suddenly I was 17 again, feeling wild and free instead of tied down to someone who barely seemed to notice I was alive. Then there was David from my old job, who reached out when he was in town for a conference. And yeah, I'd meet guys sometimes when I was out with girlfriends. Guys who actually paid attention when I talked, who made me laugh, who reminded me that I was still young and attractive and interesting. Jason never suspected a thing. That's how checked out he was from our relationship. I could have been doing anything, seeing anyone, and he would have just nodded and asked what was for dinner. Sometimes I wanted to shake him and scream, "Pay attention to your wife." But Jason was perfectly content in his little world, where everything was fine and I was just going to be there forever, no matter how little effort he put in. The texting with Marcus got pretty intense over the years. He knew exactly what to say to make me feel desired, needed. "Wear that black dress today. No panties?" He'd text in the morning, and I'd spend the whole day anticipating seeing him, feeling sexy and wanted in a way Jason never made me feel anymore. "You know he won't let me leave this late. He's too insecure." I'd text Marcus when Jason would occasionally ask when I'd be home. It wasn't even true. Jason wasn't controlling or suspicious. He was just there, existing, taking up space in our apartment and our marriage without really contributing anything meaningful. Your husband doesn't deserve you. Marcus would respond. When are you going to stop wasting your time with him? It was a fair question. What was I getting out of my marriage besides security and routine? Jason wasn't making me happy. He wasn't challenging me or exciting me or making me feel like the best version of myself. He was just safe, predictable, boring. I started getting careless with my phone, leaving it face up during dinner, not immediately deleting messages. Part of me almost wanted Jason to find out, to finally show some emotion about our relationship. Even if it was anger, at least then I'd know he still cared enough to fight for us. When I changed my passcode last month, Jason actually noticed new password. He asked, trying to sound casual. I just wanted something more secure. I told him, you know how paranoid I get about identity theft. He accepted it. Of course, Jason always accepted everything I told him without question. Sometimes I wondered if he was really that trusting, or just that oblivious. The morning everything fell apart started like any other morning. Jason was making his coffee, humming some stupid song from the radio, while I got ready for work. I was running late because Marcus had texted me early about wanting to see me before the staff meeting, and I'd spent extra time on my makeup and hair. Have a good day, babe, Jason called as I rushed toward the door. Yeah, you too, I called back, already thinking about Marcus's hands on my waist, his lips on my neck in the supply closet before anyone else got to the office. I was halfway to work when I realized I'd left my phone on the bathroom counter. For a split second, I considered just going without it, but Marcus would be expecting me to respond to his messages. I turned around and headed home, annoyed at the delay, but not really thinking about what I'd left behind. Jason was in the bathroom when I got back, sitting on the edge of the tub with my phone in his hands. His face was completely white, like he'd seen something that had drained all the blood from his body. Explain, he said, holding up the phone. My heart started pounding, but not with guilt, with anger. The nerve of him, going through my personal messages when I wasn't there to defend myself. You went through my phone? I snapped. Are you serious right now? What gives you the right to invade my privacy like that? Explain, he said again, quieter this time. I don't have to explain anything to you. Everyone deserves privacy in a relationship. Jason, just because we're married doesn't mean you own me or get to monitor my every conversation. He was still just sitting there, staring at me like I was some stranger he'd never seen before. It was infuriating. You're being completely insecure and controlling. I continued, this is exactly the kind of behavior that drives people away. You can't just spy on your wife and expect her to be okay with it. 5 years, he said, scrolling through my messages. The entire marriage? Oh, please, you're being so dramatic. So I have friends you don't know about. So I talk to people from work. That doesn't mean anything. But even as I said it, I knew he'd seen too much. The messages with Marcus were pretty explicit. The photos I'd sent, the plans we'd made, the things we'd said about Jason. You're a weak man, I heard myself saying. That's why I needed more. That's why I had to find what I wasn't getting at home. Jason stood up slowly, set my phone on the counter, and walked past me without another word. I heard the front door close a few minutes later. I tried calling him, but my number was already blocked. I tried his work, but they said he'd called in sick. I even drove by his parents' house, but his car wasn't there. By the next day, I was getting worried. Not guilty, exactly, but concerned about what Jason might do in his emotional state. He'd always been prone to overreacting to things, making mountains out of molehills. This was just another example of him blowing something out of proportion instead of sitting down and having an adult conversation about our relationship problems. I was at work, trying to focus on the Morrison account, when someone tapped me on the shoulder. Autumn Mitchell. Yes. You've been served? The entire office went silent as the stranger handed me a manila envelope and walked away. I could feel everyone staring as I opened it with shaking hands. Divorce papers. Jason was actually divorcing me. Not asking for counseling, not suggesting we work things out, just straight to nuclear option. Marcus appeared at my cubicle. Everything okay? He's divorcing me, I whispered, still staring at the papers. He's actually divorcing me. Maybe it's for the best, Marcus said quietly. You haven't been happy for years, but that wasn't the point. The point was that Jason was making this decision without even trying to fight for our marriage. 7 years together, and he was just going to throw it all away because of some text messages, because I'd found companionship elsewhere when he wasn't meeting my needs at home. I spent the next few weeks trying to reach him, trying to make him understand that this was all fixable if he'd just stop being so stubborn. I called his friends, his family, even showed up at his office building, but he'd blocked me everywhere, and apparently told everyone not to talk to me. We don't have to do this. I told him when I finally cornered him in the grocery store parking lot where he'd agreed to return my phone. We could start over. I've cut off everyone else. It's just you now. Jason looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. It's too late. You burned it down. You're not even going to try. You're not going to fight for our marriage. What kind of man just gives up like this? The kind who finally realized he deserves better. That's when I lost it. Right there in the parking lot. I told him exactly what I thought of his weaker, pathetic response to our marriage problems. A real man would have fought for his wife years ago instead of letting things get to this point. A real man would have noticed when his wife was unhappy and done something about it. But Jason had never been a real man, which is why we were in this mess in the first place. The divorce hearing was a joke. Jason had documented everything, every message, every lie. Every time I claimed to be working late when I was really with someone else. He'd even gotten tested for diseases, like I was some kind of prostitute who'd put his health at risk. The judge took one look at the evidence and denied my request for alimony, 7 years of marriage, and I was walking away with nothing because Jason was too vindictive to be reasonable. I'm too distraught to work. I told my supervisor when she asked why my performance had been slipping. It was true. How was I supposed to concentrate on spreadsheets and client meetings when my entire life was falling apart? The worst part was how everyone treated me afterward. Like I was some kind of monster instead of a woman who'd been neglected in her marriage and made some poor choices as a result. Jason got all the sympathy, all the support, while I was left to pick up the pieces alone. Marcus's wife found out about us around the same time the divorce was finalized. Apparently she'd been suspicious for months and finally hired someone to follow him. Linda kicked him out for a week, told their 2 teenage kids what their father had been doing, and even announced it to their church congregation during testimony time. Marcus came crawling back to me, but honestly, the whole thing had lost its appeal. He wasn't the powerful, confident man I'd fallen for anymore. He was just another middle-aged guy who'd gotten caught cheating and was facing the consequences. This is all your fault, he told me during one of our last conversations. I had a good thing with Linda, and you ruined it. The hypocrisy was astounding. He pursued me just as much as I'd pursued him, but now that his comfortable life was threatened, suddenly I was the villain. That's when Marcus started getting nasty, calling Jason at work, sending threatening messages, trying to blame him for breaking up a happy home by divorcing me. I didn't ask him to do that, but I understood his anger. Jason had handled this whole situation in the most destructive way possible, and now everyone was paying the price for his vindictiveness. Jason ended up filing police reports and getting some kind of restraining order. He changed his phone number, moved back in with his parents, and basically went into hiding like he was the victim here. Meanwhile, I'm dealing with the real consequences. No husband, no financial support, a damaged reputation at work, and everyone treating me like I'm some kind of pariah. The thing that really gets me is how Jason never once tried to understand his role in all this. Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I handled things poorly. But marriages don't fall apart in a vacuum. I didn't wake up one day and decide to cheat for no reason. I was lonely, neglected, taken for granted. I was a woman in her prime, married to a man who treated me like a piece of furniture. If Jason had put half the energy into our marriage that he put into documenting my affairs and planning his revenge, we might have actually had something worth saving. Instead, he chose the easy route, playing victim, taking the moral high ground, making sure everyone knew what a terrible wife I'd been, while conveniently forgetting his own failures as a husband. Now I'm starting over at 32, living in a studio apartment, watching all my married friends slowly distance themselves because they're afraid I'm some kind of homewrecker who might go after their husbands next. Jason's moved on, apparently in therapy and working on himself, whatever that means. His family treats me like I never existed, and our mutual friends have all chosen sides. But I'm not the villain in this story. No matter how Jason wants to paint it, I'm a woman who was unhappy in her marriage and made some poor choices while trying to find what she wasn't getting at home. I'm someone who stayed in a relationship longer than I should have because I believed in commitment, even when that commitment wasn't being returned. If Jason had been the husband I needed him to be, none of this would have happened. If he'd paid attention, shown interest, made me feel valued and desired, I never would have looked elsewhere. But he didn't. And when the inevitable consequences of his neglect finally caught up with him, he chose scorched earth instead of trying to understand or forgive. So now we're both alone, both starting over, both dealing with the fallout from a marriage that died long before I ever texted Marcus back or met Tommy in that parking lot. The only difference is that everyone feels sorry for Jason while treating me like I'm some kind of monster. But I know the truth. I know what really happened in our marriage, what drove me to make the choices I made. And someday, when the anger and hurt fade away, maybe Jason will know it too. Maybe he'll realize that pointing fingers and playing victim is easier than looking in the mirror and asking what he could have done differently. Until then, I'm moving forward the best I can, learning from my mistakes and trying to build something better for myself. Because at the end of the day, I deserve to be happy too. I deserve to be with someone who values me, who sees me, who makes me feel like I'm worth fighting for. Jason never was that person. And maybe that's the real tragedy of our story.